Welcome to Real World, Real Talk with Dr. D.Z. Cofield. The show represents captivating conversations and insightful information to encourage and inspire you with all you need to become the best you can possibly be. And now, your host for Real World, Real Talk, Dr. D.Z. Cofield.
Welcome to Real World, Real Talk. I'm your host, DZ Cofield, and you're listening to your member-supported radio station. And I want to thank you for being with me on today. Today promises to be an exciting show as we talk about a subject that's really not talked about enough, I think, in our community, because so many people are suffering in this diagnosis, both children and adults. And many have simply learned how to live with it without even being properly diagnosed. We know about some of the extreme cases, and we hear about savants and tremendously gifted people. But we don't really realize how many people are suffering on the spectrum of autism. This month is Autism Acceptance Month, and we're going to talk to somebody who's very passionate about this diagnosis. Now, before we go any further, let me give you a couple of housekeeping tips as we move forward through our show. If you'd like to follow me during the week, you can follow me on Instagram or IG at DZ Cofield. You can follow me on Facebook at DZ Cofield. And you can follow me on Twitter at, you guessed it, DZ Cofield. So several years ago, I did a show on autism awareness. And I had a family called from Arizona who was listening, who they were so thankful because they said nobody had talked about, to their knowledge, had talked about autism specifically in the African American community and the challenges that many African American families face in dealing with autism. In 1970, the Autism Society launched an ongoing nationwide effort to promote autism awareness and assure that all affected by autism were able to achieve the highest quality of life possible. In 1972, the Autism Society launched the first annual National Autistic Children's Week, which evolved into Autism Acceptance Month. The Autism Society is continuing its efforts to spread awareness, promote acceptance, and ignite change. Just last year, 2021, in the midst of the pandemic, the Autism Society called on media to move from using autism awareness to autism acceptance so that it would help facilitate change and inclusivity for those affected by autism. Now, that language change may not seem like a big deal to you, but it really is a big deal when you talk about the shift and the movement. If you just follow the words from what? Awareness to acceptance. There are a lot of things that we're aware of, but there aren't a lot of things that we're willing to accept. The Autism Society recognizes that the prevalence of autism in the United States has risen from 1 in 125 children, to 1 in 44 children. Over 5,000 children have been diagnosed on the autism spectrum and are enrolled in Fort Bend County Public Schools alone. That's not even counting HISD. Today, my guest is Miss Lynn Clouser. Lynn Clouser serves Missouri City as their city councilwoman at large, position 2. Her leadership is inclusive of all generations, ethnicities, abilities, socioeconomic backgrounds in representing the Show Me City, which is a very, very diverse city. She's a member of the Economic Development Committee, the Finance Committee, and is credited for creating. Okay, hold on. There we go. Lynn is a member of the Economic Development Committee, the Finance Committee, and is credited for creating Missouri City's inaugural Small Business Advisory Committee for the purpose of helping local businesses sustain and grow. She is the recipient of the President's Lifetime Achievement Award the Texas Legislative Black Caucus 2021 Outstanding Texans of HD 27, and a proud graduate of the Fort Bend Chamber of Commerce George Foundation's Executive Nonprofit Leadership Class for the 2020-2021 year. She received her bachelor's degree in mass media arts from Hampton University and currently serves on the board of directors for Hope for Three Autism Advocates, the only nonprofit organization in Fort Bend dedicated solely to autism. She is the co-founder of Autism Caregivers Around the Bend, a support group for those caring for individuals with autism in and around Fort Bend County. Lynn also lends her time and talents to other community organizations. Maybe most importantly for Lynn, because I do know a little bit, she is the mother to Marshall, who is a 17-year-old who is thriving on the autism spectrum, and the mother to Lauren, who is an amazing young lady in her own right. And we're grateful and thankful to have with us on today Lynn Clouser. Lynn, welcome to Real World, Real Talk. How are you?
I am doing fabulous. Thank you for having me. And I see you have on your blue, and you've got blue all around you. I have on my blue, which is the official color for autism. So thank you so much for having me and for using your platform to educate so many on so many different topics.
So I really appreciate your passion around this. I've had an opportunity to meet Marshall on a couple of occasions, and I've got to tell you, man, when I met him, I felt like this kindred connection. And I was telling you off air, it wasn't until my wife and I were married that I found out that I was on the spectrum, and really was because of my wife. I had I jokingly say that I had to find a special ed teacher to find somebody to really love me and understand me because she gets me. I mean, and she would say, okay, that's a spectrum move, and I'd be like, and so now I started saying it, like, baby, I'm on the spectrum, I'm on the spectrum, right? And I don't use that as an excuse for anything negative or adverse, just recognizing, who I am and really being comfortable in my skin. Because I remember as a kid, I would go to friends' houses, I would go to family members' houses. And even if they had other kids, I would sit, if I had a book or I had an action figure or something, I would just sit in the corner and just play by myself. And my mother would be like, come over here and speak to people, and you need to get a personality. And I can remember thinking to myself, like, Mom, you have enough personality for the whole family, right? Because my mom, when she walked in the room, it was like, that's when the party started, right? And my younger sister is the same way. And I would like, nah, it is just too much. Like, let me just go somewhere. I can hide somewhere and I didn't understand it until I did a show on autism spectrum many, many years ago. And it was so revealing for me. It was just like, oh my God, wow. Like, okay, it makes sense. Like, I almost wish my mother was still alive so I can go, I am normal. Like, I'm okay, you know?
Sure,
So
sure.
for people who are out there uh, who don't know you, tell us about your journey with autism and how you got started in this work.
Sure. So you mentioned my son Marshall, who is now 17, and it's hard to even believe that we are at this point because this journey has seemed like the longest journey. And I tell you, I've been through many things. I've been through divorce. I've been through lots of stuff, but this right here is the biggest journey that I have ever, and the toughest journey I've ever been on my life, throughout the course of my life. Number one, when we have children, we want our children, just like your mom, just like you alluded to your mom walks in the room and, she's the spark that starts the fire in the room. Well, we expect our children to be a reflection of ourselves. And then when we get a diagnosis for our child that a pill can't cure, and we think, wow, my kid can't follow in my footsteps or may not be able to follow in my footsteps as I hoped and dreamed, it just puts, things into a different perspective. And it's not that they can't, it's just that their life is just going to be they have to just do things a little differently. So my son started exhibiting some signs of developmental delays when he was about 3. What I thought in my brain was autism was somebody in a chair rocking back and forth, not being able to speak. That was what I thought. And that's what probably many people think. And so we were doing all this testing, and I was actually the one that pushed for testing. The pediatrician that we had at that point, they do different milestone tests. Oh, they should be talking at this point. They should be putting 2 or 3 words together at this point. Well, my son was the only child in his preschool that was still crawling, and everybody else was walking. I have a nephew who is the same age as Marshall, and he was doing things beyond what Marshall was doing. Marshall was not really talking. He might say 1 or 2 words. And I knew in my heart, mother's intuition, that something just wasn't right. So I kept taking him back to the doctor. He's crawling. You got to x-ray his legs because he needs to be walking. So finally, with my persistence, I asked for her to refer him to be tested, not knowing it would be autism. But during that course of the testing, found out that he was on the spectrum. That feeling, I literally fell to my knees and cried in the psychiatrist's office. And what she told me, and Marshall's father at that time, she looked us straight in the eyes and she said, knowing that something is wrong with your kid and not doing something about it is a form of child neglect. Now, what I took from that is that there are many people that get this diagnosis and they live in denial. They don't do anything about it. They think it'll go away. They just don't want to address it. And so that always rang true in my head. To know there's something wrong with your kid and not do something about it is a form of child neglect. So I got up off my knees. I know she probably thought I was crazy. I wiped my tears away. And for that moment on, I did the work. His father was very much in denial, as most men are. I find that when parents come to me, it's the father that's in denial, especially when it's their son involved, because they're going to play football like me. They're going to go to, the big college like me. And it looks a little differently. So why I became very vocal on my journey was because the first person I talked to was an African-American woman. Someone referred her to me. I didn't know anybody else on the spectrum. And she told me all these wonderful things about how her son had begun to progress and all the wonderful resources. It was a great conversation. I left that conversation with so much hope. But guess what? She told me, now me and my husband, we don't talk about it. We're in many different organizations. We just tell people that our son goes to a private school in Katy, and we don't talk about it. So I said, so you don't tell people that your son's on the spectrum? No, we don't. We do not talk about it. So I thought, as a new mom, wow, I've got to walk away from this and, light a fire and put it under a bushel. I'm not supposed to talk about this too. Now, this is the first person that I'm hearing that's giving me advice, great advice. So I walked away from that. Well, I shouldn't talk about this. Well, as I started getting Marshall in speech therapy, occupational therapy, private schools, all of that, I started feeling like, wow, the puzzle pieces are coming together. He's now talking. He's now walking. This is a testimony. But the first person I talked to it seemed to me she was embarrassed, and maybe I should be. And so I struggled with that, Dr. Cofield. I struggled with that. So I just, one day on April 2nd is National Autism Awareness Day. And I just came out with it. I used my social media platform to talk about it and talk about the successes. And it opened the door for so many parents to say, wow, I'm noticing these signs. Wow, you're talking about this. Wow, I never knew. I think my son is. And so I say all that to say that story, that is my inspiration for being so vocal, because the first person, I never want another family to talk to someone and feel like their child is less than. I don't care what organizations you're in. I'm in Alpha Kappa Alpha. I'm in Jack and Jill, but that does not mean that my child is less than, or people can look at me, look down on me. It's okay, because there are many of us that are affected. So that's why I'm so vocal. I use my social media platform to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly about autism. And your show is, real talk. When I talk to parents, I say, look, I'm gonna give you some tough love. I may tell you things that you may not want to hear, but you need to hear it, because you're early on in this journey, and early acceptance, early intervention is so crucial for the success of autism.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where we started in our journey.
There's several things that you hit on that I think a lot of parents and grandparents and the village that surrounds children need to be aware of. With this diagnosis, it stops being about you, and it really focuses on being about the child. Whatever your feelings are, whatever guilt you may have, whatever dash dreams you may have to live vicariously through the life of your children, it's not about you as the adult at that point. It's really about the child, and giving the child the support, the love, the positive reinforcement that they need. And I think the other piece, though, that's as important, is the issue of denial. When children are born, you want to count toes and fingers and hands and feet and legs and arms, and you're like, man, okay, and the child looks fine, and Marshall is a handsome dude, you know what I mean? So you look at him and you think, yeah, okay, everything is normal. And then you get that diagnosis. And I want to thank you for your transparency and your vulnerability, and just saying, hey, man, I dropped to my knees, because I was going to ask you, how did you respond to that? And I know some parents, even now, even though the evidence is overwhelming, they are still in denial. And, acceptance is the key. I mean, it's just better to know so you can act accordingly. So you get this diagnosis. Marshall's father's in denial. You are at a place where you're now accepting this. And I'm sure you went through the whole cycle of grief, or the whole denial and anger and bargaining and all of those things. You get to the place now where you're like, okay, we've got this young man, and what are we going to do to help this boy? And we're going to help him to grow. And I saw you post a picture just recently about him working the cash register, and his interaction. and you said it almost brought you to tears. I know it's been a long journey, but it's also kind of been a short journey. Like, it hasn't been that long. 17 years sounds like a long time at the front end of 17 years, but on the other side of 17 years, it's like, wow. Talk about just the ups and the downs in this, because I think it's important for parents to know that when you're on this journey, it's not all good days after you accept it. There's still challenges, and you are a so super outgoing person. You're a go-getter. You're a hustler. You're going to make it happen. You kind of like my mom. You're going to be the life of the party. I mean, when you walk in, everybody knows Lynn is in the room. But just talk about the ups and downs of the journey.
Yeah. So it's funny that you say that, the ups and downs, because I began using my Facebook platform as a means of awareness. So most people, a lot of people post selfies, and at that time, I just started posting about autism. It became Wednesdays. My son developed a love for fashion, and so every Wednesday in elementary school, he would put on a bow tie, and I would take that opportunity to educate people around autism. But when you talk about grief and, denial, what I say and how I describe that is, grief is not linear. I never was in denial. thank God I was never in that point of denial. But those stages are not linear. You can get to acceptance and then you can go back to anger.
Right,
Well,
right.
I would say that on this journey, we are grieving. It's a lifetime of grief, and that grief looks different than a parent dying or a child dying, because when you're reminded that your kid can't do something, or they've had a meltdown, they've done well for months and then they have a meltdown, then I think that's when you start grieving, when you realize, wow, this is, I'm realizing, okay, this moment is reminding me that my child is different. So I just think we go through the grief for a lifetime, but it just looks a little different. Um,
No,
on my
that's a
platform,
powerful, yeah, that's a powerful thought. I mean, that you're always grieving, and I think you're absolutely right. The fluidity and the dynamic nature of that cycle of grief.
yeah,
When Elizabeth Kubler-Ross first proposed it, it was taken to be linear. But now we
mhm,
know you can bounce in that thing. You can
yes,
you can be in
yeah,
denial, and then you could be depressed, and then you can accept it and then come back to depression again, and come back
yeah,
to bargaining again, and yeah, you can bounce around in it.
yeah,
what what
yeah.
what what does that denial, what have you, not for you as much as for others that you have talked to, how does that denial manifest itself? Because I'm sure there's a parent or grandparent who's listening who may be in denial, or may have
Mhm.
a family member who's in denial. And what does that denial look like, and how can they help address that denial?
Yeah. So what I normally see, and of course, I'm not a healthcare provider, so what I normally see, people that come to me, it's moms or grandmas that say, my child or my grandchild has been diagnosed with autism and dad is in denial. And I'm not saying that moms don't, get in denial, but dad is in denial. I want to get him tested, but dad is saying no. And I want to push them to that. Would you talk to them? Well, 9 times out of 10, I always give my phone number. 9 times out of 10, most people don't call me because they are still trying to accept this. But one thing that I always tell families is, I'm going to give you some tough love right now. You don't have time to sit in denial. If that means that your husband is going to have to, and I don't get into matters of the house, but mom, if that means your husband is going to be mad at you for getting your child tested, trust me, that will go away later. They will thank you later, but you've got to do what you've got to do right now because time is not on your side. Case in point, I've done this as a single mom, and Marshall's father was very much in denial, and he had some very cruel words to me when I put him in a special school. Very, very cruel. Later on, when we went to the developmental pediatrician's office, we were in that office, and I'll never forget. She said, "Mom, you put him in one of the best autism schools. Wow, he's thriving. He's come so far. Mom, I want to thank you for doing that because you did an amazing job. And that was exactly what you were supposed to do." But when the doctor left, Marshall's father looked at me and said, "I want to apologize to you and thank you for doing what you did." So that parent that's in denial will come full circle once they see that the puzzle pieces are fitting together and that the therapy and all the help is working.
Yeah.
Um, it's what I used to do, Dr. Cofield. As a single mom, I would sneak in my child's room in the middle of the night. I would put my right hand up to God, put my head on his forehead. God, please give him speech. Please let him walk. And these were the things that, speech is, we think that is, speech is a gift. It is a
Mhm.
gift to be able to make a complete sentence or to speak a
Yeah.
word. But I was that mom that was 12 o'clock at night, 1 o'clock at night. I prayed and prayed and prayed. And so I would take autism away from any child if I could. But what I will say for me, it made me a much better person. Inclusion. You talked about inclusion at the beginning of your show. that is my theme, inclusion. How do we make sure that we create this awareness? We created this awareness and this acceptance. What does that mean? How does that translate to the world? Well, we create programs that for inclusion. So that's what I've done with my platform. You know, a case in point, Nordstrom has shoe tying classes, and most people on the spectrum have problems with fine motor skills. Something as simple as tying a shoe, you know, that's could be difficult for them. And so that's where both of my children learned how to tie their shoes, was at the Nordstrom shoe tying class. Even my son on the spectrum, he didn't learn how to tie his shoes until he was about 10, but Nordstrom took that time. Well, what did I do from a mother's standpoint? I said every child can learn how to tie their shoes, no matter what their different ability is. So Nordstrom, I met with them. They hosted a shoe tying class for children on the autism spectrum. God gave me this vision. I called, I asked them to do so, and they did that. So I think when we have parents and caregivers, because parents are not just taking care of the kids now, it's the grandparents, it's the aunts, it's the whole village.
Yeah.
So when these parents, when we get, you know, opportunities like this, use that. It's like a ministry. Use that. Find programs, find stores that can create opportunities for our children. So it's been one heck of a journey, but it has made me a much more understanding person, a better person. I look through the lens. I look through life through a different set of lenses when I meet somebody and they're not looking at me right in my eyes. I say, well, maybe, you know, I'm going to give them grace because I don't know what's going on with them.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about the biggest misconceptions about people who are dealing with autism spectrum disorder. What are some of the biggest misconceptions? Because I'm just thinking what you just said. You go and you shake hands with a person. We're not talking about a child necessarily, an adult who may not look you in the eye, who may not have ever been diagnosed, or the judgment that people have with, you know, this person not looking them in the eye. What are some of the biggest misconceptions that you've come across?
Yes. So the biggest misconceptions are that these individuals, like, you know, they're children and they grow to be adults, right? That they're retarded, that they are, they can't work, that they will create a problem. They can't get along with everybody else. And so we have to teach people how to treat them, give them ways to incorporate and include these individuals. So when we talk about working, right? I was just asked to join a task force with Fort Bend ISD for older students on the spectrum who are transitioning into the workforce. And there are all these benefits. We think, okay, can you hire this individual? Well, the misconception is, oh, we've got to babysit them. They're going to be a problem. They're in the way. But what people don't realize is that they're OCD, and most of them have different diagnoses along with the autism. The OCD, you know, the stuff that drives a parent crazy, like, Mom, it's 12:02. You said we were going to do something at 12:02. If they're on the schedule to work at 12 o'clock, they're going to be at work on time. They're the most loyal people. They will be at work on time. They're typically not sick that often. If you put them in a position to do routine things, they're going to do it. They're going to do it with perfection. And so, you know, there are lots of benefits to hiring individuals that are on the spectrum. But if we get rid of, you know, the stigma involved, these kids and these individuals, we can see the best in them. They're different. They're not less.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about the siblings of individuals with autism, and talk about, so first, when you got pregnant with your daughter, this was several years after Marsha was born. Did you have any apprehension? Did you have any concern in the pregnancy? Were there tests that you took? What was your thought process as you went through that?
Yes, that's a great question. Um, I did. I was terrified. Um, I was trying to enjoy my pregnancy, but in the back of your mind, you're wondering, what if? Because there's a statistic, I can't remember what the number is. If you have one child with autism, there's a percentage, that you may have another one. And so I just kept praying. I kept praying. There were a couple of tests that older women get when we're carrying, and so one of those tests came back not favorable, and so at that point, and my doctor would not tell me over the phone. She had to call me in because she knew I was going to freak out, which I did. So long story short, Lauren is, we call our regular children, we call them neurotypical. So she is as neurotypical as they come. But the siblings, this diagnosis can be very stressful on the siblings, because when they're going through, the sibling is going through the meltdowns, it can be very traumatic to that child who is, watching all of this. That child may get more attention. The child on the spectrum may get more attention because they need that attention.
Sure.
And it could be very traumatic. I can remember one time where my son was going through an extreme meltdown, and I was melting down with him, Doc. I was. And my daughter, she was 6 at the time, she ran in my room, was crying, pulled the covers over her face, and said, "I can't live my life like this. This is too hard." And so at that moment, I knew I have got to do weekly check-ins with my daughter to make sure she is okay. So we have to pay attention to the siblings, have to make sure that sibling is okay. And I offer her, if you ever need a counselor, I will get you a counselor. If you need to talk to somebody and you can't talk to me, I will get you a counselor. But it is equally tough on them. But on the bright side, I have gotten calls from my child's teacher saying, "Lauren is so good with little Johnny in class. He's our autism kid that's in class, and she always takes time out with him. She always helps him." And that is because she was used to doing that growing up with my son.
So when you look at siblings, and in particular with Lauren, it's almost like she's the big sister, little sister, or the little sister, big sister.
Yes.
And even her interaction with Marshall over time, I'm sure has taken on a life of its own now that she's 10, 11, going on 20, I'm sure. Like most like most 10-year-olds do. How can friends and family support families that they know are living with a person with autism spectrum disorder? How can they help? What can they do? Because I think, to your point, that mom who was ignoring and never, or not ignoring, but never said anything about it and just didn't talk about it, um, that doesn't mean that it's not obvious to other people or it's not seen. I always believe it's better to know. I always believe it's better to be just transparent and vulnerable, and that way you just, disarm the devil. Just put it out there, and here's the way it is. How can friends and family members support?
That is such a good question. Um, so you can ask questions. You know, I always say, ask that. Every family who's dealing with autism has their own set of challenges. So everybody's looks different. Um, so for me, it's something simple as, "Hey, I just wanted to check on you and Marshall. Hey, do you need anything?" It could be, "Hey, let me take Marshall for a movie while you go and do something for yourself." Or it could be something as, hey, I would like to, like, I have this next to me. My neighbor across the street, she had this candle made for us, and she gifted this to me. So something like a small gesture like that, but really asking that family, what is it that you need help with? I want to help. And the biggest challenge I think lies with this is that we don't think that others will know how to treat our children. Well, what if he starts melting down? What if, well, you teach them how to do that. You know, I tell parents all the time, when you take your child to Sunday school or you take them to, the parents' night out, you tell people, listen, my child is on the spectrum. You may need to say things a little slower for him. If he goes in the corner and starts to, play by himself, you can bring other kids over to him, or redirect him into the circle to communicate with others. So telling people how you want to be treated, or you want them to treat your child, but I think the biggest thing is, don't be afraid to call the friend or your family member and say, how can I help? What do you need help with? Because this journey is, it's the up and downs. And if somebody called me next week and said, what can I help you with? Well, if you can take him, I haven't had a massage in 6 months. So just that hour would just help. So just being vocal, asking, what can I help with? And demanding, I am going to help you. Because we're so used to doing things on, especially us single moms. And no, I'm going to help you. What is it that you need this week? Can I send a meal, something? But
Yeah.
we just have to be more vocal with just asking what the person needs, because everybody's needs are different.
So, to tell or not to tell, and part of this I want to tie to you as a single Black woman who is of dating age, and when you are approached, when you date, how do you protect your children, and how do you protect Marshall? Because I know a lot of single women, some make the decision not to date until their children are grown and gone. Some really struggle with how soon to introduce my children to a person. At what point is it serious enough to introduce my children to this person? How do you handle that with Marshall in particular, and Lauren, of course, being a young girl? But how do you handle that?
Yeah, so I think that, it's a personal choice for everybody how they stay that. I just know me, my priority right now is my children. It's not, it's not dating somebody and having them meet my children. Um, it's, it's a personal choice. So, but I am very upfront, when I meet somebody, or, this is, I want to get that out there. I have a child with a special need, and my availability may not what is traditionally looked at, what you've been used to, but this is the way, this is. I may not be able to do something every weekend. This is the time that I have. So it's a person. Some moms I know have decided that it's just too taxing, to try to date and raise a child with special needs, because it is a spectrum. We talked about that earlier. The lower spectrum, the nonverbal, the kids that flap, that might bang their heads. It's a lot, and it takes a lot out of a person, especially if they're doing this on their own. And so dating may not even be, on their radar at all. But I will tell you, as somebody told me early on, they get better as they get older. And I have definitely noticed that my stress level has gone down. Now, when he hit the puberty years, then that was a problem. That when we got into puberty, that was like us circling back, right back around. But that's definitely a personal choice. And when you say to tell or not to tell, I always say, it's a personal decision for you to talk about your journey. I know doctors right now who have children on the spectrum, and they're just like, I'm not ready to talk about it. And it's a personal decision, and I let that be. But I just hope that my platform, utilizing me, because I have a huge platform as a elected official and being on different organizations. My goal and my platform is to let people know it's okay. This is okay. You can get through it. It's expensive. It can be taxing. I tell the good, the bad, and the ugly,
Yeah.
and it's okay.
So I want you to talk a little bit about this idea of, well, first, let me ask this question. So in Marshall's spectrumness, does he have filters, or is he just kind of just kind of blurts it out? It even if it's true, like you're fat, or that
Yeah,
person.
yeah, yeah.
He's not trying to be mean. I mean, it's just like, does he have like no filters in terms of just, hey, I'm gonna tell you what it is and tell you like it is?
Mhm. That is the biggest thing we have worked on, and I have exhausted myself throughout the years is working on that filter. We went through, you remember Frenchies when on Sky, when they had that Frenchies. I can remember a time we were sitting down and this couple had joined us, and Marshall, when we get up, Marshall said, "Mom, can I tell that man over there he's obese?" And I was like, "No." He already knows it. You cannot tell him that. Or, if he tells somebody, oh, you look like Whoopi Goldberg, or you look like this person. And so it has been a journey to talk about, son, if this, do you think this can hurt someone's feelings? Because what's in doesn't always have to come out.
Right.
Think about this before would this hurt somebody's feelings? If somebody has a gold tooth, and you don't have to bring that up. They already know they have a gold tooth. So you do not have to bring that up. So it has been a journey, so much so that now his growth is, if he notices something, he will say, "Mom, can I tell them?" And he gets his okay for me, and I say no. So that is growth. Celebrating those things, those small things. The fact that he says, maybe this could let me ask, or he just doesn't say it. So the filter, we've worked on that very hard. So he's gotten much, much better. Yes. There have been times I felt like the Matrix. I could see something and I could see he was about to say something. And I'm like, no. And I could catch him before it comes out of his mouth. But
Right.
most of them, they don't have the filter. And then we also have to talk about, Dr. Cofield, most of the people on the spectrum have different diagnoses. So not only does autism come with that, you've got OCD that most of them have.
Yeah.
And that OCD can present in many different ways. My son, he's grown out of this, but he used to stand up and sit down before before he ate about, I couldn't remember how many times. And the doctor said, "I bet you he has a number. Ask him what's his number." And I asked him one day, he said 4. So
Wow.
they've got anxiety, and that presents itself in different ways, which can look like, I don't know, maybe they tear up pieces of paper, maybe they bite their nails, maybe they pull. It was a time where my son pulled a plug of hair out of his head because he was so anxious about going back to another school. I know friends that have kids that are blind on the spectrum. So you add all of these different diagnoses. Some of them are bipolar. So every journey is a different journey. They say when you meet one child with autism, you've met one child with autism because it looks differently.
Yeah. What do you think has been the key to you successfully navigating this journey in autism? And I say that knowing that you're still navigating the journey.
Yes, yes.
But to make the progress that you have made, what are some of the keys that you would say to parents who are listening out there, that, hey, if you can hit these benchmarks, if you can do these 2, 3, 4 things, that this, you may not see it now. They may have the
Mhm.
3-year-old who is autistic, or the 5-year-old who's on the spectrum, and they may not see it now. What are some things that you would advise them to do that you look back on and say, man, this was key to us making it where we are right now?
Your journey. I mean, your village. My parents. I'm thankful to my parents. They're both alive, and they're both healthy, and they're your village. Your village matters. Maybe you don't have both of your parents. Maybe you have a sibling. Maybe you have a best friend. But that village is so important, because the days that you feel down and out, that you want to cry and just give it up, then you need to have some place where you can drop your kid off so you can, have a peace of mind. Or you have to
Yeah.
have somebody that will you talk to, that you can call and they pray over you. So that um, you need resources. You definitely you need to know where to go to find appropriate resources. And that's what I found early on as a parent with Hope for Three, which is a nonprofit that offers resources. We don't have all the answers. There's no book that says, okay, you are about to be an autism parent. So utilizing the resources around me, um, just being patient. I think that the easiest thing that we can do, Dr. Cofield, is the thing that we forget to do, and that is to pray. In the
Mm.
moments, God, give me direction. Just give me direction. I know that you have this all mapped out. Just give me the direction. And that it's okay to cry. It is okay. Sometimes I've cried and I've cried, and I feel much better after I've let that out. But talking to other parents who have been successful on this journey, I think that is probably the key to navigating this as successfully as you can, is linking up with somebody who's done it, and that can give you the resources, the right schools, the right speech therapists, the right developmental pediatricians, the right child psychiatrists, what medications have worked, which don't. So linking up with somebody and knowing that you're not alone. So I know that was a lot, but there is hope. I share my story, and I'm glad that you touched on your story, because, you look at somebody like you, and then you have a parent who, like, just called me last week and said, we got the diagnosis. But then they see you, and they see how successful you are, all because you made a decision to tell your story, Dr. Cofield. And you are giving, what you don't know is that you're giving parents hope. You're giving me hope, because with a child who's 17, and then I look at you are pastoring a church, you have so many platforms, and you are doing it, you're navigating through it, but you're doing it successfully. And those of us who think maybe this is something that we should be embarrassed about, or I don't want to talk about it because, what will people think? Well, people know your child is different. Whether you tell them or not. So just
Yeah.
being transparent, it gives others hope. So that's been kind of my outlet. I think I talk about my journey. It gives people hope, and that is enough for me. Is knowing that my journey is helping somebody else.
Man, I tell you, I'm listening to you, and I'm getting emotional, in part because I never would don't think of myself as um, this special individual. I just do what I do. And, uh, when I think about me being on the spectrum, and for those of you who are just tuning in, you're listening to Real World, Real Talk. I was telling a story earlier about my mother who, I tell people all the time, anything good in me, I got from my mother. All the other stuff I got from my father, right? But anything good in me, I got from my mother, and my grandfather, her father, who um, was such a source of strength for me, because of his unconditional love for me. And he and my grandmother just, pumping me up. And I can remember when I said, I can't do something. He was like, never say can't. You can do whatever you want to do. And looking back over my life, as I stated earlier, I'm on the spectrum. I'm probably three and a half. So I probably drift between 3 and 4. I don't have OCD. Well, my wife may say I do. There's certain
Next time
things.
we're gonna get First Lady Tori on here so we can get a real
You know
deal.
what? No, let me tell you something. So this is funny. The house is hers, but my bedroom is a mess, right? My bedroom is a mess. I don't know. Marshall may be OCD and he does things differently, right? My stuff is all over, but I know exactly where it is. I know exactly where everything is. So even if it's a pile of stuff, I know that what I'm looking for or what I'm going to wear is like 3 levels down on that pile. I know where it is. And so when my wife started moving stuff, it would freak me out, and she did not understand why it freaked me out. And I would say, "Why did you move my stuff?" And she was like, "Well, I didn't move it. I just straightened it up." I'm like, "No, you moved it. Like, you moved it. It was right there. Now I don't know where anything is."
Right.
And
Right.
and she was like, "Well, why are you upset?" And as she would say, sometimes it would cost us a day, because I would get so flustered and I would get so upset because I couldn't find
And
the stuff that I was
fixated.
looking
And
for.
fixate.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
I was fixated on it, and I was like, "Man, how do I do this?" And she was like, "Baby, I'll help you find it." And I was like, "No, I just need you to leave my stuff alone. Like, just leave, just don't. I know where my stuff is. Like, go clean your stuff. Don't touch my stuff, right?"
Yeah.
And just things like that, helped me to really come to grips with. And she has been so key in that. And so I tell people I have I guess what I would call a high functioning level of autism spectrum disorder. I can function and I'm fine. One of the movies that blessed me was the movie The Accountant, that Ben Affleck was in. And I literally cried watching that movie. And I think it's a great movie, and it's not anything really in the movie to necessarily cry about. I mean, it's not a sad, tragic movie like that. But I remember crying through that movie because I was like, oh my God, like I could just identify with this dude, and the social awkwardness and just all of that stuff. I was like, man. And I tell people I do what I do, but it's an effort. Even now at 60, it's an effort for me to walk into a room and to be hospitable and to be friendly and to do, because it's still that part of me that's like, man, I could just find a corner and a book and I'm good, man. I really am. And so, people always ask me, it's like, how did you make it during the COVID and the pandemic and the lockdown? I was like, man, that's the best 2 years of my
Perfect.
life. I mean,
Yeah.
it was
Yeah. I
amazing.
get it.
Yeah. And so let's talk about Marshall getting his first job. Man,
Yes.
how did you feel? I mean, when you found out, okay, here's this kid that, I gave birth to and struggled with walking and struggled with talking, and this kid gets a job. And this is not a this is a listen, this is a job, honestly, that I would struggle with, because I would struggle with dealing with the public all the time. I do what I do at church because that's what I do, but I would struggle like having to interact with the public all the time. I don't know, how'd you feel when you found out he got this job, and then you got a chance to see how he was doing on the job?
Well, and let me preface that by saying that I always tell parents, you have to help find your kid's voice in their talent. And when you recognize they have a voice and a talent, you have to put them in situations to help them thrive. We're all busy, but what talents does your child have that you can maybe get them extra lessons for? When Marshall was coming up, he had this fascination with fashion, right? Bow ties. He learned, I got him James Martin, who owns the Charisma. He was a Charisma coach. And you might be familiar with him. He's in Third Ward. He taught young men, or teaches young men, manners and how to tie bow ties and pocket squares. So I signed Marshall up for those classes. So at the age of 10, this kid is on the spectrum. You got most grown men that can't tie a bow tie. Can you tie a bow tie, Dr. Cofield? Can you tie a bow tie?
I learned as an adult, and I struggle because I don't wear them often enough. But I have a collection, and
Okay.
I'm about to say I'm gonna get Marshall to be my bow tie tire.
So it's just those little things, he won't wear a pre-tied bow tie. So he's been doing those things. He wanted to open up a bow tie company. So I took him to get his DBA and opened up his bow tie company. We're still working on that because mama's busy, but we're still working on that. But I recognize these talents of his. Church greeter. Marshall loves people. So I signed him up to be a church greeter. So then you fast forward to, okay, what can't he do? I'm going to put him in positions, and I'm going to make a seat at the table for him. And that's what parents need to do. Your kid is different, not less. He could be a greeter just like the neurotypical kid right next to him. It may just look differently. And then we hope that people have grace. We hope that there's been enough autism awareness that there's acceptance. And so if you see somebody doing something quirky, then you know to accept that and love them for who they are. So if we fast forward to this job thing, I know a friend who our fathers were friends for many years, and he's a general manager for Mod Pizza. And so I saw a post that he made, and I said, I would love for Marshall to work there. He said, well, let's get him an interview. And he said, well, I'm going to give him the job. I said, no. I said, my kids work for everything. So I need for you to put him through the same process that you would put anybody through. So Marshall, in his fashion sense, he dressed up in a suit with a tie, and we practiced interview questions. We practiced handshakes.
I love it.
We practiced everything with questions to ask an interviewer. We went in there, and the customers couldn't believe, like, he's dressed up in a suit to come and interview for a pizza job at the pizza parlor. So he sits down and he's asking his questions, and I had to back off from being helicopter mom. He's asking the questions. He wanted to know when he was going to have his break, how much he was going to get paid. And he told the guy, you will never have to fire me. I'm going to be your best hire. He stands up, shakes the man's hand, and says, when can I start? So that became, when he left, Marshall just was in excitement, like, yes, I got it. I nailed the job. He was so excited. And for me, I just have to be honest with you, I wasn't shocked. It was a moment of, I knew he could do this. So I wasn't in shock. It was because he got himself the job. Because of everything that I had done to prepare him for the last 17 years, he got that job for himself. I thought that they were going to have him. They hire people who are differently able. I thought they were just going to have him just doing busy work. Little did I know, they've got Marshall sweeping. They've got him washing dishes. I said, son, you know how to wash dishes? Yep. I said, when are you going to wash dishes at home? Oh, mom, I'm going to do it soon. So then he's making pizzas. Well, I went in the other day, he's on the register. And I'm like, my kid is running the register? I could not believe this. But this is what almost brought me to tears. He's bringing this couple up. He tears off the receipt, hands it to him, and said, have a blessed day. That just stole my heart. And
have a blessed day.
It said that everything, have a blessed day. I never told him to say that. I'm sure nobody there told him to say that, but it's in his heart. He accepted Christ at an early age. He accepted Christ when he was 7. Dr. Cofield, I didn't tell him to do that because that's a personal decision. He said, Mommy, I want to go and give my life to Christ. I said, what does that mean? He said, in his own way, he said, Mommy, it means that when you die, your soul goes to heaven. And I
Wow.
said, come on, son, I'm walking down with you. So he accepted Christ in his life. And there are times where he encourages me. When I want to give up, he says, Mom, don't you give up on me. I'm like, I'm not giving up on you, but Marsha, I just want to give up right now because you are not doing anything I'm telling you. Mom, don't you ever say that. Don't you ever give up on me. So everything that I have poured in, I'm seeing it poured back out at me.
Wow.
So for parents who don't think that don't know what the age of 3 or 4, what that looks like,
Yeah.
it's a day by day. Pour into them, cultivate their skills, get them lessons. My son loves puppetry. I got online during COVID and I found the president of the National Puppetry Association to give my kid lessons on Zoom. I would have been able to do that had I not been the mama that I am. But I knew if there's a will, there's a way. So he's got puppetry lessons. He's got so many things he wants to do. In college, there's so many resources now, Dr. Cofield, for these individuals that go to college. So many universities are offering programs for these kids. So the journey has been different, but now there's so many different resources because we have turned autism awareness to acceptance. And we know that these individuals can do anything with the support of the people in the community.
Wow. Man, I'm telling you, my eyes are watering. I mean, just to hear, just to hear what Marshall has
Yeah.
accomplished and what he's done.
He's going to
It's
prom
just
too at the end of this month.
he's
Prom. Can you
he's
believe
going
that?
he's going
He's
to the
going to
prom.
prom. He
Wow.
asked a young lady to the prom. I said, I'm not asking. So he called her, asked her to go to the prom. And, right after that, it was, Mom, when are we getting my tuxedo? Mom, when are we getting the corsage? Mom, when are I need a limo. Hold on now, you're working. So you can get some of that stuff. So, Dr. Cofield, it's times like this where, we talk about grieving when we see something that our kid is not doing.
Yeah.
But it's times like this where I am so excited where it's things like this where he's a normal kid and I can just bask in the fact that he's a normal kid. My favorite verse is Jeremiah 29:11. I think it's 29:11. I know you plans to prosper you, to give you a future. That's the scripture that I always remember for him. And whether it was his puppetry, him, the third grade science fair contest out of everybody, and this is not just autism kids, this is everybody in his school, him winning different awards, to him working at Mod Pizza. I've prayed that prayer over him. I've had hope. There have been times where there have been times where I've been broke, that I had to spend my retirement money putting him into a school. And this is real talk, putting him into a special school because I knew that I needed to do that. I was willing to do anything for my kid, but the rewards have paid off and God has not failed us yet. We don't skip a beat.
So the only thing I'm going to say in closing is, well, let me ask this. Is he making bow ties now?
He is not, because as a single mother, that's one of the disadvantages of being a single parent. I have another child. I have a full-time job. I'm on city council. There are things that I just realize that I can't do or I'll overwhelm myself. So he's got his DBA. He is not making bow ties just yet.
Did he learn how to make bow ties? Did he learn it? Like, is he cutting
I
the
got
pattern?
him sewing. I got him sewing lessons. Yes. So he's
really.
I did. I went and got him sewing lessons. Yes.
Okay. So I know
we haven't explored that.
Okay. But here's what I want. Number one, I already know the first bow tie he makes, your dad's going to buy. I already know that. So
my dad doesn't know how to tie a bow tie.
Yeah, but he's a granddad. He's going to buy the first bow tie anyway. And then, your son can teach him how to tie the tie. I want to buy the second one and I want to have him on the show because we're gonna make sure we get Marshall some business for his bow tie company. I want him to I want him to get overwhelmed making bow. I'm gonna make man. We're gonna have him making some bow ties for everybody. I just love I just think he's just a great kid, and Lauren is as well. So we don't want to overlook Lauren, little Lauren. We want to make sure that we celebrate her as well. But I think I want to thank you for being with us today on Real World Real Talk, and just helping us get a better understanding, putting a face on Autism Acceptance Month and what that looks like, and what we can do to help our friends and family members raise not just awareness, but raise acceptance, be able to be support for them, and maybe to look in our own lives and to see where we're on the spectrum as well. So I want to thank you for that today.
Thank you for having me. And again, thank you for your platform and for using your platform. And this, how can we support one another? You asked me, by using a platform like you've done today to help the millions of listeners that I'm sure that you have. Do we know all the answers? No, we don't. But sometimes there may be one person that listens to this broadcast and there's one nugget that they take away. And guess what? It's all worth it. Just like that family that listened, I think you said was in Arizona. So
Yeah.
I do want to leave a resource. If there are parents that need a resource, Hope for Three was actually started with the inspiration of an African-American family, Hope Montgomery and Eric Montgomery. They have triplet girls on the spectrum. Triplet girls on the spectrum. Now, they are on the lower end of the spectrum, but because they were willing to tell their story, there was an organization founded in their name, helps so many parents and families with autism with resources, with funding. And to date, they've given over $1 million funding to help families. So hopefor3.org is that resource. And I'll leave my my information. If anybody needs me, I can be emailed at lynn.clouser@yahoo.com, or you can follow our support group at Autism Caregivers Around the Bend on Facebook. Thanks again for having me today, Dr. Cofield. This is a ministry for me, but like I said, I would take autism away from everybody, but God He chose me. I'm nobody special. He chose me and said, here you go. Here's this child. And I did and have done everything that I can for him. And I'm so glad God chose me to be Marshall's mother instead of somebody else. It's a blessing and an honor.
Well, we appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The late Vernon John said, if you see a good fight, get in it. I always add, if you don't see a good fight, start one. And the fight for our children is always a fight that any parent worth their salt wants to get involved in. But it can be a tough fight when your child is dealing with and is on the autism spectrum. And there are varying degrees and levels of autism spectrumness. I suffer from it as well. And I don't really even want to use the term suffer from it. It's something that I have learned to live with. It's something that I have learned to manage and learn to recognize, even in those times when I am experiencing overload and I'm experiencing anxiety. It's just the way that I've learned that I have to live in order to be successful. I think our guest, though, was so spot on. One, it's better to know. And secondly, it's better to address the issues as early as possible. When you see some developmental delays, when your child is not moving as they would normally move, when they're not speaking as they should be speaking at that age, please go get that diagnosis. And even though it's going to be tough, I hope you've gotten out of this show that you can make it. I hope that you have gotten out of this show that there are better days ahead. I hope you have gotten out of this show information and inspiration to be able to help your child deal with autism spectrum disorder. The truth of the matter is, many times our hesitations, many times our challenges and difficulties are really rooted in self. We're making it more about ourselves than we are about our children. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what somebody else thinks. That's your child. That's your gift from God. And I want to encourage you to embrace that gift and discover the genius that is in that child. We've seen tremendous things accomplished by many, many children who have become adults who are on the low end of the autism spectrum disorder. But I promise you, there are a whole lot of us who are highly functioning who are on the autism spectrum disorder. And I hope and pray during Autism Acceptance Month that we would move to accept those who have these gifts just a little bit more. I'm Dr. DZ Cofield. You've been listening to Real World, Real Talk. Until next time, God bless is my prayer.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Real World, Real Talk. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast to be notified of new episodes every week. Follow us via social media using the @RWRTDZ username on all platforms: YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. To submit any comments, questions, sponsor opportunities, or future show suggestions, visit us online at rwrtdz.com or via email at info@rwrtdz.com. Thank you for listening, and we hope you've been inspired to be the change you want to see in the world today. Until next time, be real, keep it real, and stay real.